Havana, Cuba, in 1948. Not a lot of women like to talk about their age. I am 58 years old and I'm proud of it. I came to the States when I was 11 in 1960, and it's been a wild ride because a lot of the Latinos came from the bottom up, and my family was wealthy in Cuba. They were in the print business. My granddaddy was called the paper czar because he imported the paper from Canada and from many places in the world to help produce newsprint, to help produce magazines and also Avance and other newspapers in the island. Basically what happened was that when Castro took over, the first thing that we lost was the business because it was magazines, and they were very culturally significant. A magazine such as, for example, Bohemia was very political, and a magazine such as Vanidades, still around, and it was still the #1 ladies' service magazine in the world in Spanish, in Latin America. So we ended up here in Miami, and my grandparents, they're Basque, and they ended up back in where they came from in the north of Spain. So once again, the family was separated, but we actually did not cross the Rio Grande. We did not come in a raft. We came in an airliner, but that doesn't make it any less different. For all the kids that grow up here and have a culture shock, I would like to tell them to really hook into their roots, because that is what defines them. I remember the last night in Cuba, my father could not tell us. My mom had 4 kids then she had another baby here. They could not tell us that we were leaving forever because they were afraid we would tell our teachers, that we would tell our boyfriends, the nuns, and the phones were taken up by the government. So we found out we were leaving the country the night before. And I remember that I had my little jammies on, and I went up to look at the ocean, and I remember thinking, God, I just have to let it all in, because this is the last time I'm ever going to see my ocean. And you know what? Like I said, I've been here so many years, and I've never been back. So that was the last time. Well, in Havana, we used to go to a convent. And in Miami, we went to a convent. All-girls school. My father was Vasco Español, so he didn't figure the girls and the boys should be distracted by each other when they were teenagers in school. So I grew up with the nuns. And here in Miami, it was called Assumption Academy. I graduated from Assumption. And then I went to the University of Miami. And of course, I majored in mass communication and journalism because I was the family business. And my first job here, where I did my internship for University of Miami, was in the family magazine. By then, my family had sold that magazine to a Venezuelan concern. They were called Bloque de Armas. And the gentleman that owned it, Mr. Armando de Armas, now passed away, was like my second dad. And he taught me everything I know. I spent almost 25 years in his company. In print journalism. And the reason I did that was, even though that we speak Spanglish at home, and I feel more comfortable in English than I do in Spanish, but my dream was always to be a bilingual journalist, and that is what I am now. I had no idea that I would become a broadcaster. Television was not in my plans. It was not in my future. It just happened to me. And I noticed that even though when I started the Cristina show in 1989 and we were doing the pilot, I remember that holding the mic, I was sweating so profusely from being so nervous that I thought, I wonder if this can electrocute me. And from there, 17 years later, in fact, today, as we're doing this interview, today is our 17th anniversary on the air of the Cristina show. And television it was an accident. I did print all my life. I was editor-in-chief during all those years for Latin American Cosmopolitan. And I traveled all over Latin America as a young woman before I married and before I had my kids. And at that time, I remember women were joining the workforce. So I was lucky enough to see how that happened. You know, the liberation of Latin American women, not in the States, but in their countries of origin. And I understood what makes us here in the States, the Latinos that live here, a microcosm of what goes on outside, because we come from almost 30 countries of origin. And I think that the magazines and the show have been successful because I try to concentrate on what is the common denominator between all of us and not the things that separate us. Something very curious happened to me at the end of my University of Miami stay. I had 9 credits to go, and my dad went broke. Uh, by then, my dad wasn't into journalism anymore. He was into construction. He would take trips to Saudi Arabia and help build schools. He was into another business altogether. And in one of his big adventures, he went broke. Now, we're 5 kids. I was the oldest, and the oldest of the boys was misbehaving at the time. And Papi had to send him to Valley Forge Military Academy for him to be a good man, because he was really like wasting his life and his time when he was a teenager. And his name is Pachi. He ended up studying electronic engineer, like my father. And for Pachi to be able to go to Valley Forge, Papi could not afford the University of Miami and Valley Forge at the same time. So he called me up and he said, look, you know, some guy is going to take care of you all your life because you're a little princess. But as a Spanish man from Spain and a Cuban man, it is my duty to give your brother an education because he's going to have to take care of his wife and his kids. And I said, ay, papi, what a machista you are. I can't believe this. So Cristina Saralegui never graduated from college, and my brother is now an engineer. I've noticed that in my career, many times we need to go first. And we open the doors and the barriers, or it's like rompiendo barreras for the fields that we go into. Like, for example, right now, we're doing Spanish licensing for home product. Nobody's ever done that before. Lots in English, none in Spanish. Back then, when I started doing the English show, obviously, it's not that I had a problem with my language. I mean, I'm sure people understand me. My problem, it was too early. So there was still very much prejudice. I remember in many places in the US, they used to call in the stations and say, please get the spick off the air. So I guess that if that were to happen now, it would be differently received. Also, the ratings for 13 weeks that we were on were excellent. But what happened is that we never came to a deal, a production deal, as far as production dollars, and the people that were doing it wanted to give us a smaller production budget that I had for Spanish. And that was suicide. And my husband told me, look, we never go to fight if we know we're going to lose. At least it's got to be an even fight. So what happened is that we pulled the plug on that show, and then it got reported by all the media, you know, the media in the business, that it was a rating situation, it was an accent situation, and that was not true. But you know what? Let bygones be bygones. I'm still here. Like Elton John says, I'm still standing. That's my favorite song, and it's been 17 years. So whatever. I have felt a lot of prejudice in ways you would never believe. I remember that I thought that when I wrote my autobiography, I would call it Too White in America. Because when I went on the air at the beginning, my people used to send me hate mail saying, don't you know that brown is beautiful and you ain't brown? So I used to tell them that my Spanish part was in my heart and get up and show them my fanny. And I said, don't you see that what you're doing is just as prejudiced as the people that are prejudiced against you? Our minority is not a racial minority. We come from Celia Cruz to me, everything in the middle. We're not a linguistic minority. What we are is a cultural minority. Okay? Now, the advertisers back then were making a lot of mistakes, and they didn't know, they didn't understand that our languages are different. It's like if you try to make one commercial for Australia, New Zealand, Canada, London, South Africa, and you're going to have a lot of vulgar language in there in the middle. Like there's a lot of words that are bad words in different countries in Latin America, not in Cuba, for example. So you have to start learning how to speak, depending on the product, who you want to approach, in a language that really doesn't exist anywhere. It's a made-up Spanish. But the most important thing, I think, is role models. What Spanish language television, for example, what my network, Univision, has given the kids in America, it doesn't matter if the kids speak English or if they speak Spanish, it's role models. They get exposed to sports figures, they get exposed to people from different countries, singers, They get exposed to people like the ex-Surgeon General from the U.S., Dr. Antonia Novello, who's a good girlfriend of mine. They see all this mix and the good side of the mix. And then that makes our kids want to stay and work in Spanish and work in Hispanic projects. Before, when I was young, in school, if you spoke Spanish, the nun would hit you over the head. You were not supposed, you had to completely integrate. And now you are seeing Orientals, and you are seeing Afro-Americans, and you are seeing hyphenated Americans of all kinds intermarrying and having fun. You know, there's a lot of blacks in New York that speak Spanish. You know why? Because their girlfriends are Puerto Rican and Dominican, and they dance merengue. That is good, not bad. I don't think that in the Cristina show, I tell them anything that they haven't heard in another program. It's the way I tell them. I talk about myself. I talk about my problems. I talk about my kids. Because if you have real life people that are, I call them my panelists, and they're sharing their life stories and their problems with you, how dare you not explain to them that your kid smoked pot and is in the same boat and you don't know what to do with him? In other words, what I try to do with the show is I'm just like them. So what we have is an interchange between the people that watch at home. I am like the conduit. I am not the expert. We have the experts, which are the people that went through horrible things in their life. And then we have the people watching at home. Our work, my work in my heart has been AIDS work. Because I have a gay brother. And AIDS work is really important because when I started the show, everybody wanted us to do, it became like the disease of the month. And everybody wanted us to raise funds for them. So Mark and I, my husband, my business partner, and the father of my children, we got together and we decided we need to pick one cause. Because he can't be everything to everyone. And the reason we picked AIDS is because that's the time when kids' sexuality is coming awake, gay or straight, they're kissing, they're dancing, they're ignorant, they're going through a lot of high-risk behaviors, and we figure that kids are never going to stop making love. They can go on a diet, they can stop smoking, they can stop drinking, but they're not going to stop making love and falling in love. So I did it for my kids. I had 3 teenagers back then. And now one is married, the other one is living in New York, and the baby is just turned 20. But I'm very happy that they learned along with me. I also learned things of, for example, sex education that is so important. How to explain to your kids what sexually responsible behavior is. I remember Titi, the big one, was 10. When I was peeling shrimps to make an enchilada, she showed up. She told me, Ma, you know, how do the babies come and stuff? I swallowed hard. I gave her a little pot, some shrimp, and I said, let's peel shrimp and talk about this. So what happened to me is that I got the huge opportunity to get educated along with everybody else. So this show was a godsend for myself and my kids and my family. Well, the trick is to be real, because television acts like a huge magnet, and if you're a fake, you're going to be a big fake on TV. What I tried to do, and I think it worked, was at the beginning when I started, the girls, the ladies that were watching me were the young grandmas that didn't work because it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Actually, we started at 5. And they were babysitting their grandchildren. Now, I have the grandmas, I kept them. I have the moms, and the kids are 25, and they're having kids. So our show is multi-generational. That's one of the reasons that it's worked. Another reason is that we did not do a Cuban show for Cubans in Miami. We spend most of our budget, and I'm the executive producer, in flying in people from everywhere. It doesn't matter if they're in from Spain or from Chile or from all over the United States, and every age. So we would be a program about everybody, about tears and smiles, and not about a regional group. It was about all of us, and that worked as well.